We're here with Rabbi Brovender this 1st of September, conducting this interview as part of my program, Profiles of Faith. We are at Rabbi Brovender's house in Yerushalayim, in Israel. And first thing, Rabbi, how do you like to be called?
My mother called me Chaim.
Okay.
My wife calls me Chaim. I think that's fine.
Chaim, Rabbi. So thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. On the issue of harvesting our commemorative memory, you call it a memory, of the bridge to the generations that we should learn from.
I think that collective memory is an important thing. I fear, however, that we've lost it. In my generation, everybody knew some mother or grandmother who lit candles on Friday night, and I think we've lost that. Everybody had pictures in their album of a Zayde who looked different than they look. And I think we've lost that as well. I think the memory is not as good. Maybe it can be reconstructed. Maybe we can encourage people to look into their past and ask, well, who could that person possibly be?
So if you had to, could you be, for the purpose of this discussion, the collective Zayde of all the people who want to look up to you?
I think that this project and other projects like it, encouraging people to think about where they came from and what meaning that might have, are important and good. I mean, in Israel, there was once a time when in Israel people thought that they were going to create new kinds of Jews. And part of the issue that they had was disconnecting from old kind of Jews. And while on the one hand, this may have been, brought great benefit to Israel on certain levels, I would say that it's been terrible on other levels in terms of your self-definition and identity. So I hope that this will change, that Israelis who are convinced that they are different, that they are new, that they are the possessor of a new kind of Jewish identity, would reconsider and imagine themselves to be also the descendants of the old Jewish identity, which after all, whether you like it or not, is the progenitor of who we are today. I mean, we came from someplace. It's not just genetics, but it's ideas. The ideas that we inherited from somebody, and they from somebody. And even though we had this intention of not looking like them and not talking like them and not thinking exactly like them, there's no doubt that they made us. And looking into who they are is a way of looking into who we are. And that's important.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm interested in what touches your Jewish soul. What brings out in you the Ahavat Hashem over the Yirat Hashem, although both are important?
Ahavat Hashem is defined, the search for Ahavat Hashem is defined by the Rambam. Already in Hilchot Yesodei Torah, the Rambam says, you just have to look at the world. You look at how much of the world is working in our favor, is serving our cause. He's talking about nature and science. And the more you look into the world and understand its complexities and think that all those complexities were put into place by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for us, they all do us a great service. That produces Ahavat Hashem. My own addition, small, minor addition, is that you could also look at human enterprise. The search for science, the search for music, the search for art, the human enterprise. God built us so that we could create things. We're not just another kind of animal that works on instinct and does what it does because it has no other thought. We somehow are able to open ourselves up to a variety of enterprises, to a variety of talents that might be stored within ourselves. We're able to find them and develop them. And this is a wondrous thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, the power to be who we are.
I'm asking you, as Rabbi Brovender, as Chaim, what makes you feel the love to Hashem?
What does it for me mostly is Talmud Torah. I find that all those things that people say about learning Torah, for me, they are true. If I spend an hour learning Torah, I feel good about that hour. If I understand something that I've learned, then I feel elated by that. It's almost as though, as the Nefesh Chaim says, that somehow I'm allowed entree into a very secret place which represents the mind of God. I'm in the conversation. I'm in the conversation, even if I go down the wrong track sometimes in my understanding of things. But I'm in that conversation. And right or wrong, it gives me a wonderful feeling. So that Talmud Torah for me is the main effort that I have, which gives me the pleasure, which changes my worldview, which enables me to carry on doing all sorts of other things that I don't necessarily understand very well.
It's what sustains you.
It's what sustains. Well, I haven't tried without it, but it makes me feel that I'm doing something special.
Can you tell us a little bit about your road of what you've done from Web Yeshiva, Atid, Amiftar, Brovender's, Lindenbaum, and so on?
Well, that kind of sums it up, I think.
But in your words, it sounds better.
Once I met Rav Shaya Shuv Cohen, the chief rabbi of Haifa in Yerushalayim, years and years ago. And he was, of course, very famous, and I was not too famous. And he said to me, what do you do? So I told him that I was a Melamed, that I taught people how to read Mishnah and Gemara and Chumash, things like that. He said to me, but I've heard of you. How could you be a Melamed? And I heard of you. So I said, well, in order to improve my image, I say I'm a Rosh Yeshiva. But really, I'm a Melamed. Now, of course, this is a takeoff on what Rabbi Soloveitchik always used to say. So all of these titles are really about one thing, giving people the opportunity to learn Torah, to be involved at their level, at their speed, to join the community of people who learn Torah.
That is why you have gone internet-based with the Web Yeshiva, so you can reach more people as me sitting in America and watching you, and interactively can participate in the
shir. That's true, but I feel that it's the future, that the internet is going to give everybody the opportunity to learn Torah from whomever they wish to learn from, no matter where they find themselves. This is an idea that is so mind-boggling that many people who I speak to just can't get it. They can't understand. So of course it's better to go to a particular yeshiva, to listen to a particular Rosh Yeshiva. But if you're not there, it's a wonderful thing to be able to be in the shir that he gives, no matter where you happen to find yourself. So what I'm doing, I think, is not just teaching people Torah on the internet, which is, of course, a nice thing to do, but I like to think that I'm pushing the envelope a little bit.
I think what a nice way of putting it is that you're being more inclusive.
Obviously, when there's a need, you have to meet the challenge, and you have to do what you have to do. But the internet is good, and I think that the next stage will be that schools, many Jewish schools are complaining about the costs and the budgetary issues that they have. And internet teaching and internet learning is cheaper. And it may not be quite as good, but it's almost as good. And I think schools will be looking in that direction to find new kinds of systems with which to teach the children.
Rabbi, you mentioned that you are Melamed. That's how you see yourself, right? What made you want to be a Melamed, a Mechanech?
There were two things. I got into it by accident, and I stayed in it because I liked it. So those are two negatives, right? The first accident was that when I came to Israel, I learned in a kollel. You know, people come from America to Israel and learn in kollels usually because they have nothing to do and don't know what they should be doing. So I was learning in a kollel. The head of the kollel, Rabbi Elephant, Zichrono Livrocha, he thought that having an American program would be a good idea. And since the kollel was made up of Yiddish-speaking Yerushalmim, his choices for who should head this new program were very limited. So I got the nod. He thought that I should do this, so I did, and I liked it. I never got tired of it. I never got tired of teaching Torah. I've done it for many, many years, and many, many groups, many types of kids. I always like it. So I just kept doing it until it was really impossible for me to do anything else. So here I am, a Melamed.
That is inspiring.
If I would tell my mother, Zichrono Livrocha, that her son became a Melamed, boy, it wouldn't go well. It would not go.
Speaking about your mother, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard that you mentioned somewhere that your grandmother was the best davener you ever met. Is that true?
The grandmother is always the best davener because grandmothers daven not by hour and not by community, but they just place themselves before the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is what davening is supposed to be about. And it's so hard to recreate that. But originally it was the Magen Avram who said it, about his grandmother. And he said that he didn't understand why his grandmother didn't daven Shachris and Mincha. And one night, the Magen Avram, one night he was up very late and he heard his grandmother getting up, and she always got up at 4 to clean the house and bake the cakes and make the, right? So he heard his grandmother walking around the house and talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about her children, her grandchildren, wishing this one well and that one. So he said, obviously a person who is talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have to daven. What's she going to daven for? That was the insight of the Magen Avram. But I think it's true about grandmothers, and grandmothers are people that you should look to learn how to daven. Men can also look at grandmothers. It's not a terrible thing, not at all. One of the worst places to learn how to daven is what they call shul, right? Where people get together in order not to daven. You know, like if they stayed home, somebody would say, oh, you didn't go to shul today? You should daven at home. But if you go to shul, then no one tells you to daven. It's like a kind of an aberration, but it's the fact. So you go to shul, you talk to your friends about how the week was and how the stock market is and what's the latest with so-and-so and the latest with somebody else. But you don't daven. But you went to shul. Somehow there's a compensation there.
I'd like to be on the positive.
That's positive. Look at your grandmothers.
That is where the positive.
Look at your grandmothers. Look at the women davening at home. I mean, it's true that women want to go to shul sometimes. They want parity. I never could understand exactly why they want it, because they could talk to each other at home. They don't have to come to shul to talk to each other. But the people who daven at home, women who daven at home, can you imagine? You can't fool anybody. Like when you daven at home, you have to just daven, because otherwise there's nothing else that you're doing. In shul, you don't have to.
As a child, who inspired you the most regarding Torah and Yiddishkeit?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, I would like to say Rabbi Soloveitchik, but I didn't feel that I was really in a position where I could see him as my inspiration. You know, he was so far removed from any achievement that I might have. you know, I'd be to say that I would like to emulate Rabbi Soloveitchik, or although he had a dramatic effect on me in this regard. Rabbi Soloveitchik is the only shir that I ever went to where I had the feeling that the Maggid shir was learning. You know, everybody else comes in and they have a beginning and a middle and an end and it's all set up. I'm not saying that Rabbi Soloveitchik didn't have that. He also had a beginning and a middle and an end, but he was also learning. He was learning in the shir. It was him. He was learning. So that was a very impressive thing to me. It was a very impressive thing to me. But I think that, you know, when I was a kid, I was in Bnei Akiva. And Bnei Akiva, they told us religion and Torah and Eretz Yisrael, they all go together. And I fell for it. I thought it made sense to me, you know, and I didn't ask all the other people who disagreed why they disagreed. But I was young, you know, I got married and I came to Israel.
Well, you're reaffirming what my belief is that you should do things when you're young and foolish. That is the best recipe for marriage.
I'm still doing things that are a little foolish.
Rabbi, who are your heroes in the Torah?
I find Moshe Rabbeinu to be a very attractive personality in the sense that his spirituality was described as humility. That it's all a question of life is about priorities. You know, like what gets you angry? You get angry because you didn't get the same seat in shul as you got last year, or you didn't get elected to be the president of some non-existent organization. So it's about priorities. I mean, people obviously think that those are very important. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew that having experienced the presence of God, there was nothing else that could ever be quite important on any level. That's what Rashi teaches us at the beginning of the Chumash. It says, Naseh Adam, the Torah says, God says, Naseh Adam b'tzalmeinu chidmutenu. Let's make a man. Rashi says, Ad v'tanuto shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the humility of God. So Rashi doesn't mean that God has humility. Rashi means, my opinion, right? Rashi means God created humility. And he created humility by conversing with the other people in heaven. He created humility in order to give us the option of humility, because that's what makes us godlike, right? The ability to say, to be able to discern what's really important from what is not so important.
Is that what a mechanech is?
Sometimes.
Rabbi, it sounds that you had some form of support in your Jewish background, in your Jewish upbringing. Many Jewish kids today don't have role models and they don't really understand the value of their Judaism, their Jewishness, their Jewish soul. They're drifting, they're confused. How do you tell a person about the value of his ancestors, about his Judaism, about the Oibishter, about your view of God's world?
One of the things that people have to learn is that there's a great product that we have created over the last 2,000 years. And that product is nothing to be ashamed of, quite the contrary. It's something to be proud of. It's the work of great geniuses who applied themselves to a particular problem called, what should the Jew be doing? And I think that if you clarify that to young people, that we have a lot to be proud of, that we weren't just sitting around in the diaspora and kind of wasting away and allowing ourselves to be pushed around every place. And now in Israel, we're not going to allow ourselves to be pushed around as though this is the story of Jewish history. And I think that that's the door that has to be opened. The pride in our past.
But if I can take it away from the product for a second, because the product makes me feel there is a way to be vegetarian, there's a way to learn to surf, hand gliding, and being a Jew. So if all of these things are equal, somebody can decide instead of being Jewish, they'll be vegetarian, or they'll just be explorers and go to the Amazonas, or be good mountain climbers. What is in being Jewish that your parents were Jewish and your grandparents were Jewish? You probably have few rabbis in your background. Why is it important? Why is it important to do it versus be a good mountain climber?
Well, I have to admit that I haven't done any of those things that you mentioned. Mountain climbing, surfing, hang gliding, there was something else.
Vegetarian.
No, I was a vegetarian for a while.
See?
But vegetarian is not action, not an action act. It's just...
Well, if you cook it, you're acting.
If you cook it. I say it's good. And I want to prove it to you. I want to show you how much effort went into producing what we call today Judaism. The product is like the 2,000 years or 3,000 years of enterprise. Now, that's not a small thing. Either the young people are proud of that or not. I want to make them proud of the fact of what we did. I mean, no one else did it. No one else has that intellectual baggage that we have. No one. There's no, I mean, it's true the Greeks produced well for a short period of time, but I wouldn't want to join with the Greeks today.
Jews in general have been on the forefront of every movement there is, from communism to Buddhism to any ism there is. So they have actually been doing exactly what you want. They've been following the products. So if Judaism is just a competitive product, some people may like Buddhism. The question is, why is it important to continue what your Zaydis did, what your Zaydis did? What is it important besides the product?
I think that's a further stage. You originally asked me what I would do. What I would do is sell our intellectual history. That's what I would do. A person doesn't have to justify always the way he is. You just have to feel good about it. Now, it's true that if there's a Jew out there and I can engage him in a conversation about halakha, the chances that I'll be able to kind of interest him in being Jewish are great. I mean, if I have to fight with Mao Zedong, I don't know if I'll win or I'll lose, but I don't have to. That's not the issue. That's not the issue. It's true that there are Chinese who are interesting and have done things, but that has nothing to do with me. I mean, I'm locked into a particular mold. I'm Jewish.
Patriotic pride, home court advantage.
I guess. I mean, you could say all of those things, but in fact, when a Jewish child is born, somebody usually gives him a Jewish name. Gives him a bris milah. It's something that it's very hard to avoid being identified on some level. Seinfeld, was he Jewish? He's Jewish, right? Because he can't help himself. I'm not talking about like some kind of open conversation, like an open competition, like a wrestling match between Mr. Jew and Mr. Chinese. We're talking about a person who is Jewish. I mean, that's our problem today. We're not getting to the people who are Jewish and say, but I don't want to be. I'm not interested in this. Why should I? Those are the people who are of our interest, and there are many, many Jews in that category.
I'm interested in your expression, feel good. Now, if you're sitting on a train and next to you, across from you, sits somebody who you get into conversation, you see that he's a little confused, and you want to inspire him, and you notice that intellectual pursuit and products don't really interest him. What would you tell him about the fact that he's Jewish, he was born Jewish, and to love it? Would you embrace him? Would you hold his hand and say, Yingale, let me tell you, if it's a good thing, how would you hug him? How would you inspire him? Would you tell him, come for Shabbos? How would you hug him?
On the subway. Shlomo Karbach used to tell stories about him riding on the subway and inviting people to come to see him on Shabbos. And I think people felt good about it, but I'm not sure that the effect was something overwhelming. People don't change the way they are. I think you have to be prepared for the opening. It's not as though you could go on the subway and say, okay, who's Jewish? 3 people raise their hand, and then you take the one who has an earring and a tattoo and long hair and you say, you, I'm going to get you. I don't think it works that way. I think the way it works is that you have to always be available and wait for the opening. Somebody has to come over to you like you're dressed a little funny, you know, you're wearing a suit and a tie and maybe a hat, and somebody comes over to you and you say, look, I have a problem. My grandmother once told me such and such. What should I do? So you have to be ready to pick up on that opening and to say, look, you know, give me a call. We'll talk about it. Let's sit down here. I'll tell you what I was thinking. It's this preparedness. We live in a world where people are not so trusting. And so somebody comes over to me and says, oh, look, my grandmother said this or that. So I say, oh, I don't want to talk to this. Who knows? Maybe he's a drug addict. Maybe he's out to steal my money. So we kind of trained ourselves. I used to ride the subway all the time from Brighton Beach to Yeshiva University. It's a long ride. And you know, all kinds of people came on and off on the subway. Not all of them looked so appealing or interesting. So you learn kind of not to say hello to people, not to be outgoing. I mean, that's a byproduct of the world that we live in. So the first thing we have to do is tell ourselves, you know, the people who are in this, we have to be open. We have to be open, we have to look. And when we see an opening, to jump in and to take it. And I don't think that you could just run after people and say, are you Jewish? Put on tefillin. I don't think so. You could do that at the kotel, because the people who come to the kotel are already expressing something about themselves.
Rabbi, if I understand you correctly, I understand that the real way to embrace somebody is to convince them that you are available to their opening, that you are there for them. Is that the last push?
I think it's the first push, not the last. There has to be some beginning conversation. And the beginning conversation should come from the side of the person who is seeking something. He seeks peace about a certain issue. It's something that's bothering him, and he has to know that he can ask you that question. Now, some rabbis are very good at that and give others the impression that they are available. And other rabbis give the impression that they're not so available, that they're very busy, so busy that they can't deal with people who are not members of their congregation, which I think is always a sad note.
Rabbi, switching to a different path is, you lived through one of the most amazing periods of renewal in Judaism in the world, where Judaism was almost decimated. And an amazing renewal where we have now probably more than we've ever had. How do you see this?
I think the great thing that the Jewish people have created in the last 60 years is called the State of Israel. If you look back on modern Jewish history starting from 1945, there isn't anything that happened that was expected. In other words, de facto, you could always use clever categories to explain anything. But a priori, no one would have guessed that Israel, the state of Israel, would be an economic, military, and industrial power in the world. In the world, 60 years after, a bunch of interesting but ragtag people declared it a state.
So you just jumped into the deep water of what Judaism have created, which is the State of Israel. And if to emulate from that, you would tell other people, just jump in.
They say, I once went on a speaking tour in America. I think I told you this story. Well, I was speaking tour in America for Aliyah. They used to do that. And I was in Detroit in a shul, supposedly speaking to a group of people who were interested in coming on Aliyah. Afterwards, a grandmother, a woman must have been 80 years old, said to me, "Rabbi, how long have you been in Israel?" So I said, 30 years. And she said, "Do you think you'll stay?" I mean, what's happened is, in America, America is Israel. You know, there's no difference. It seems to me that the future of the Jewish people in every way, manner, or form is here in the state of Israel. Seems to me. But I know that there are a lot of people who live in Teaneck and Englewood and Muncie and Borough Park, you know, who think that the Jewish people have managed to beat the diaspora. In other words, they educate their children the way they wish, they collect together to daven the way they want, they're able to support endless charitable enterprises in the way that they wish. I mean, within the limited powers that I have to make a determination about what's going to be, I think what's going to be is Israel.
Rabbi, I was fortunate to hear you talk many times. You're inspirational and transformative. I want to know how you do it. What part of your inside, of your soul, your neshama, your intellect, your education, your upbringing that you use?
That's a tough question. I went to the Yeshiva Flatbush. Yeshiva Flatbush, extracurricular was the name of the game. You had to do a lot of extracurricular things. So I was on the debating team, and I was in the thespian group, and I learned how to dance, and all of this in high school. And I guess that made me into a bit of a ham. So there you have it. The secret.
Performing.
Yeah, well, it made me feel comfortable about performing. You know, I can do it.
On a different subject, in view of many difficulties in this world, what can you tell a young person who is struggling with God, who allows the Holocaust to take place, for terrorists to kill innocent people, for rabbis to be beaten, for Jews to be persecuted still? What do you tell him, and what do you say about forgiveness?
I think young people are more focused on current issues, things that are happening right before their eyes. You know, why is it that in certain countries people are being killed and no one's doing anything about it? Not so much the atrocities of the past as the atrocities of the present. That's my opinion. My personal engagement with young people is that they're more interested in trying to understand why we haven't learned a lesson from our own past histories, why thousands of people are being killed here and thousands of people being killed there, and somehow the world finds itself unable to take the required steps to stop that. That's my personal impression. As far as the bigger questions, I find it very difficult to second guess God.
What did you ask when you were hurt? Did you say, Hashem, I'm a teacher, I'm a melamed. Why did you allow people to do this to me? Why did you have any conversation?
I thought about the Rambam. You know, the Rambam says in the end of the Moreh Nevuchim that even though God is watchful, that doesn't mean that God is watchful all the time on everything. So that when Zaid is like John Smith, when Zaid steps on a cockroach, it's not because that cockroach was given a death sentence in heaven. Not everything. So that's how I thought about myself at the time. I was the cockroach. I mean, it could have been anybody else. It wasn't me. You understand? It
I
wasn't
understand,
a judgment that I had, that in heaven they decided that Brovender should be beaten to a pulp.
You answer one question, but you're raising another question. You're saying to the people who ask about Hashgacha Pratit, why should or would or could I get this or be assigned that or punished for this any given second, you're answering, sometimes they're bad ladders, as Acher, in the famous, and that agrees with me. But for the whole concept of a watchful God, a caring Avinu, Malkeinu, even a boss who allows his, we have Osha, who allows his employees to fall off a scaffolding, the boss is not a good boss. The mefaked, the commander, who asks his soldiers to do something that can harm them unnecessarily, is a bad commander. Where God, obviously, should be better than a bad boss or a bad commander. He should be in charge. And being in charge and omnipotent, as we'd like to see him, involves some degree of connectedness to what happens to each and every one of us.
Look, if you speak legally, like the legal system that we adhere to, if Reuven kills Shimon, and you have two witnesses that say, they can attest to the fact clearly that Reuven killed Shimon. So then, even though Reuven can say, look, I was stressed out, and Shimon did this, and he annoyed me, and you can bring all kinds of, you could then expand. The only way the system can work is if you're able to isolate Reuven killing Shimon and saying that that's the only issue on the table. It's true that afterwards the decision is rendered, or almost before, you could bring in other people, character references, so to speak, But the question remains, Reuven killed Shimon, true or false?
So you're saying, but can we prosecute God?
Can we even imagine that we have control on the variety of elements that go into the divine decisions about things? I mean, the whole thing is unimaginable. I don't know. I mean, we see things from one point of view, but maybe years and years later, we might see them in a different point of view. There was a time when we thought that the destruction of the temple was the end of the Jewish people. And we did not imagine at that moment, I think, that Torah would become the new Beit HaMikdash, and that we would, with Torah, be able to withstand disaster and diaspora and etc. So we didn't know that at the time, but that's how it was. The same thing is true. I mean, again, I have no way of justifying, explaining, understanding. It's beyond me. Somebody says, well, what did the million children do who were killed in the Holocaust?
But
it's not a question I can deal with.
So you gave me a systematic answer. But my question is about the pain of one mother or one father or one person, about losing, about hurt, about pain. How can you accept a God who allows you to hurt?
What I mean to say is that accepting God has nothing to do with how you evaluate the way God runs the world.
Your pain, you did good, you were in a way from a shear to a shear, and now they took away from you your leg, your eyesight.
Maybe pain is a good thing. I always say, people ask me, what did you think at that moment? And I say, nothing. I was in too much pain. Pain stops you from thinking, from analyzing, from understanding. I mean, you just, like, the pain is overwhelming.
But doesn't create aggression, anger?
I suppose to some people it might, different people.
So you remind me the old story about the people who went in the ghetto, or where was it, to prosecute God. They found him guilty, and then they went to daven mincha.
Look, it's a story. The story is that somehow, if God is in my house, and God is in my family, and God is, that I can talk to God about the Baditcheva talk to God, the Chaim talk to God. it's not in our nature just to be astounded by everything and not mention, not say a word. So we talk, and sometimes we say things that are silly, but they're the only things we can say. We don't have any other language to confront God with except things that are somehow a little bit silly. You know that God knows, and you know that. So we daven. We come and daven, we say, what do you mean? You mean that God overlooked this particular sick person in the list? And so you have to remind God. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, right? But it's the only language that we have. It's the only thing we think that we could share with God, even though it doesn't make any sense. But that's what your story is.
You just made sense to me. I figured out something new. You are saying that our secret as God's people is for as long as we can talk to Him, then we have God. And if we don't talk to Him anymore, then we lost Him, and then we lost something in ourselves. So actually, the reason to keep God in the picture is that without Him, we have nobody to talk to. We're alone.
It's pretty good.
I like that.
I don't know if I said it, but you said it. That's
well,
also good.
I deduced from what you said. Actually, you saying that the only thing you had left is to kvetch to God. So I know what it is to be alone. But if I remember correctly, Sharansky, when he was freed, the journalist came to him and he said, how does it feel to feel free? To be free? And what did he answer them? He said, I was always free. As long as you are wired, you have the Wi-Fi, you're connected.
That's for sure. In other words, no one can prove to anybody else that God exists, even though everybody who thinks that God exists knows absolutely that he's right.
I think you're talking about what somebody expressed in a very communicative way. He says that there is the outer empiric and there is the inner empiric. So the reason for our conversation here is to talk about the inner empiric, although we're doing it from the outside. You have something that you can communicate. It's an inner empiric conviction. And you cannot prove it,
right,
but you can smile it.
Yeah,
you can hug it.
You can be very definitive about it. You know, someone who speaks to God doesn't need any excuses. He doesn't need to create a complicated theorem about why God exists, because he just spoke to God.
I find people to be really going about it very often the wrong way. They have an inner empiric, inner conviction. Then they go out to prove why God is God, because they created the universe. It's an outer empiric, and they have the secret.
I think what you say is true, and I think it's always say it's important to go to a shul to daven in a place where you think there are other people who daven. It's enough just to think that. You don't have to prove it. No. But if you think that there are people in the shul who really daven, and you can stand next to them, you could put yourself with them, then you'll daven. You'll learn how to daven. I've always lived with my own people. I've never tried the other option. And I've always found it to be positive and valuable.
So nobody out there, theoretically, living with the difficulties of Am Yisrael, is it enough?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to imagine something that's unimaginable. So I'm saying, you know, Am Yisrael is, is doing very well. Imagine if we were in Eastern Europe today or in America, 50–60% of the nation would be assimilating. Here in Eretz Yisrael, nobody assimilates. Hardly anybody. Even though they want to.
They work hard.
Yeah, but they have nobody to assimilate to. You know, it's look at that. Look what happened after the Age of Enlightenment and after the terrible Holocaust in Europe. I mean, so God put us in a place where all we can do is grow.
So on this topic of God putting us here and watering our plants, What do you think about Mashiach, the Geula?
I would say about that some things, like there are two forces. There are the forces of heaven and the forces of earth, on earth. And so everybody, they both want the same thing. They want everything to turn out. But what we're not always sure about is what the percentages of effort are. Like how much does God take care of the whole thing? Like, the Satmar Rav would say, God will take care of it. It seems to me we have to do as well as we can. We hope that in heaven this doesn't go unnoticed. In Eretz Yisrael, we have a focus. In other words, we can think of ourselves as being here permanently. Whereas one of the features of diaspora living is that you might always have to move. Of course, I would like this to be the beginning of something even greater. I mean, who would not?
Your message is that being in Israel is being home.
Home means that whatever you invest is going to remain. That's what I think home is. I think home is, you go here in Eretz Yisrael, there are shuls that have not been operating for 1,000 years. We dig them up, put them together again, and it's a shul. It's amazing. In Bavel, there are a lot of shuls. At the time of the Tanoim, the Moroim, nobody's digging them up and rebuilding them. So that's in even America. The neighborhood changes. You have to sell the shul to the black Baptists and build another shul somewhere. Nobody's going to go back to the black Baptists and take the shul back.
So what do you think about people who are rebuilding shuls in Europe?
I think okay. Everything. Everything has to do with memory. Everything has to do with people have memories that they think are important, so they go to Lezhensk and they go to Ger and they go. I mean, even though it's ridiculous because Ger is here in Eretz Yisrael, what do you want to go to Ger for? I mean, it's an old warehouse, but it touches you somehow. It's in Hebrew they say Nekudat Siyun. It's like it's in my history. I want to see it. I don't want to go back. Right. But I'm not leaving Yerushalayim. I'm not leaving Bnei Brak or Ashdod or wherever the Ger Hasidim are. No one would come up with that kind of idea. The same thing is true about Braslav. Braslav, okay, they go to Uman, but they all come back. It's like you go for Rosh Hashanah, but Yom Kippur, they're all back. So...
on the topic of the covenant of God with the Jewish people, and
about getting into tough questions.
And about the whole issue of Tikkun Olam, I've had this question. What do you tell a person who is struggling with the universe, with Judaism, with the family, with making a living, and you tell him then that the fate of the world is resting on his shoulder?
I think if a person feels or sees himself as being an important cog in the created world, in God's created world, that he'd be able to deal with other problems as well. If a person thinks well of himself, a person goes to shul and says, I am here representing God, and I'm here to fix God's world. That attitude will be helpful in a myriad of other things that he has to do. He won't just fail. He'll be out there fighting his own failure. So I don't think that these two things are contradictory. I think they feed, positively on each other and sometimes negatively.
Repeating a question that I asked my son, my third son, Alichai, who's 21, what would you ask a great rabbi? And he said, can you make deals with Hashem? God, you know what's in my heart. I don't feel like getting up this morning, putting tefillin, going to shul. I meant to do it, but is it okay? I'll do it tomorrow.
I mean, doesn't everybody do that? I mean, most people are imperfect in their devotion or halacha, but they say it's all right. Just now, just once, I think most people do that.
The world is going from the right to the ultra-right. Guilt now is punishable. If you didn't do something, then it's terrible. And there are more and more people who make now Judaism totally by notes. You missed a note, and you're out of the choir.
I don't think that's true. I mean, I may be out of some kind of connectedness, but I know the yeshivot very well, the world of yeshivot. And even though they try to present themselves as producing a standard product, that every Bachur yeshiva is exactly the same, in fact, that's not the case. In general, people are held in by the community, by the friends, by the standards that you would like to have for your family. One of the reasons that Daf Yomi is so successful is because if you put in 45 minutes a day, then the hope is that your children will see you walking from your house to the shul and then coming back after Shachris, and they'll say, my father learns. He still creates an ambience that is positive. So you have things that people do them in order to be beseder. Like whatever else, like, I didn't get up one day, or I didn't do this, I didn't do that, but I'm beseder because I take my Gemara and I go to Daf Yomi.
You are students, you see your rabbi, you see your father goes to Daf Yomi, and you want to emulate this. But you're not sure. How do you know that you have the ability for faith? How do you know that you have faith? It's put it in your own words, but how do you know that you're capable? You like baseball, let's say. You like to pitch, but you know that you can't pitch 96 miles per hour. So you do not go for tryouts. But in faith, there's no measurable yardstick where you can say, I know that I have what it takes to learn and be a good Jew and have faith.
I would say this. Everybody has had an experience which grants him the feeling that God and faith are real. For some people, they go to yeshiva and, they daven on Yom Kippur. They've never done this before, and all of a sudden, ne'ilah, everything is electrified, and people are anxious, and they want to do it faster and slower and finish and eat, and they feel at that ne'ilah, maybe it happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they feel something that they don't usually feel. For some people, it's, you go to the Scottish Highlands, and you see the beauty that is just overwhelming. And you say, this has got to be God's idea. So if a person searches in themselves, they will usually find an experience which for them validates faith. And that experience has to be grabbed onto and developed as much as you can. Right? It could be that you were once in a yeshiva and you stood next to somebody and you were certain, or you were in a shul, you were certain that that person was talking to God. And if you're certain that that person is talking to God, that's the whole story for you. That's the whole story for you. It's not something that you can communicate to others. It's not something you can give away. But it's yours.
Experiential.
It's real. I mean, it's experiential, but it's a real thing for you. It really happened. And I think everybody, if they look into themselves and they try to find this kind of experience, they will find it.
My difficulty stems from being inspired by great number of rabbis who I've seen. Everybody loves how low they have risen to. They have a folding mattress, a shirt that they've worn for 2 weeks. They look unkempt. They eat one meal every day and a half. And they are the closest to Hashem because they removed themselves. But if we remove ourselves, and ourself is quite important to begin with because God made us with ourself, what is left is like cutting our hands because we want to show God how much we're willing to give up. But don't we need ourselves?
It seems to me that the Rambam's position on this point is that you have to be thoughtful. The Rambam's position is eating, no gluttony. Enjoyment, simcha, but no holilut. And the best course of action probably is not to go wild on the weekends and then have to get over the hangover during the weekdays. I think, on the other hand, that if the king of Japan saw a butterfly that he had never seen before in his life, and it was lunchtime. He would go and chase the butterfly and try to catch it, because that's what he thought was very important. So if a person learns Torah and thinks it's very important, and it sustains him, it gives him a good feeling that he should probably follow the stars in that direction. But I think that the principles of the Rambam are correct, that you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing. You have to be clear that you're doing as well as you could do at this time. I mean, you don't have to be neurotic about it, I think, but you have to be clear-minded about it. And it's true that sometimes you have to take your wife out to dinner.
You refer to the topic of judgment. A person should judge for themselves what is the right thing for them at the moment. Maybe a movie, maybe a dinner, maybe learning. And if they could, they would. But they're told by a lot of Rabbeim out there that they should aspire to overcome their needs because their needs are bad. And learning is good, and if they succumb to their needs, they should feel guilty about it. So you need chizuk to give them.
I can rephrase something that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told me. The Lubavitcher Rebbe asked me, what do you do? When I first came to Israel, and I was back in America, and I was given the opportunity to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe, my wife and I. She was more into it at the time than I was, I have to say. When I came to see the Rebbe, so the secretary, Rabbi Groner, he said to me, I know why she's here, but why are you here? Which, told a lot about their system of investigation. I said, I came to drive. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody had to drive. So we were talking, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, what do you do? I said, I learn in a kollel. So he said, no, he says, go away from Yerushalayim and teach Torah. Go someplace where they don't have too many teachers. Yerushalayim is full of teachers. Go someplace else. So the story within the story, of course, is that I didn't listen. And I didn't leave the kollel, and then the yeshiva started, and I went into a partnership with Rabbi Riskin, and that partnership forced me to leave Yerushalayim. I said, the kollel, all the rabbanim, they all tell me I should sit and stay and learn, and I shouldn't go anywhere. So the Rebbe looks at me, and he says, rabbanim, there are things that they know, but there are also things that they don't know. And you don't have to pay attention when they tell you things that they don't know about. Rabbanim are very important, and they know things, and it's important to listen to what they say, but they don't know everything. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful about asking rabbis to answer questions that they may not be qualified to answer.
Rabbi, we can sit and talk forever, but before we end this segment, I'd like to ask you to do something strange, but I'm sure you've done it before because you deal with Talmidim, and at the table every Jew does it. We all sing. We are singing people, and I'd like to ask you if you're willing to entertain us with some zmiras that you enjoy.
I'll sing, I'll try to sing a Zmira that my father, Zichrono Livracha, always sang on Friday night. It's the Zmira Kol Mekadesh Shavi, which starts the Zmirot that we say today, and the tune is not, it's not modern. It's old style, an old style tune. Kol Mekadesh Shavi Karoi Lo Kol Shomer Shabbos Kados V'Chalelo Schoro Abai Mod Al Pi Pa'olo Ish Al Machneu V'ish Al Diglo Avei Hashem Avichakim B'Binyan Ariel V'yem Shabbos Kodesh Tizu V'Simchu Ki Mekablei Matan Nachal Liel Gabsu Yedechem Kodesh Imru Lo'el Baruch Hashem Asher Nosan Menucha Le'amo Yisrael. My father had a very nice voice, very clear and sweet. And so when he sang this Zmira, what was there, we let him sing it alone because it sounded good. Dorshei Hashem Zera Avram Ohavo Hamachrim Lotzeis Min HaShabbos Umimarim Lovo Usmeichim Lishomro Olorei Veruvo Zayom Oso Hashem Nagi Lov Nismichobo. You know that one of the reasons for Zmirot, besides the fact that you sing, is that the words constantly remind you of what Shabbat is. Because, we tend to forget, or we tend to think, it's just last Shabbos. So people say, it's Shabbos again? It's Shabbos again. Like, it's not such a serious thing. But the Zmirot don't let you get away with that. They force you into thinking what Shabbat Kodesh means, what Simcha means. This is what this Zmirot to do. We'll do another paragraph. Zichru Torat Moshe b'mitzvah Shabbat Geruso Charuso Yom HaShvi Kechalo Ben Reyoseh Mishubo Otso Torim Yiroshu V'Yichachu B'Mama Kol Asher Oso V'Yechal Elokim Hayom HaShevi'i Melachto Asher Oso. Of course, a hug.
I want to tell you something.
How can you miss out on a hug at a time like this?